Hi, I'm Gerard Virga, and welcome to the Florida Family Law Attorney Podcast. This is season one, episode one, and we're here with Joey Virga, who's a local realtor in the community, and he also happens to be my brother. And while I'm not a realtor, I'm a family law attorney. Joey's here today. He's going to answer some questions and give us some insights on what role realtors may play in the divorce process and selling houses and acquiring new homes following a divorce or a family law situation. Joey, welcome to the show.
Hey, Gerard, I appreciate you having me. It's an awesome experience for us to be able to do this collaboration together.
Thank you. Well, the first thing I think on everybody's mind is, what do people need to know about their home and their home value when they're considering a divorce?
Okay, the main things with the home value that they need to know about it is, they need to look at the comparables, the comps. But, with the divorce, they've got several different options that they could do. One spouse could try to stay there and refinance out the property. Another spouse or the spouses can jointly agree to sell the property and for them to either purchase or potentially rent somewhere else to try to break that up a little bit. But the two options, usually what's best and recommended is for them to sell the marital home and for each of them to try to find a home that fits the needs if they have children for school zones, et cetera, stuff like that.
It seems to me that, in our cases and what you're saying here, typically the two 500-pound gorillas in the room are what is the value of the house and what is everybody's credit score? Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. Credit score and then qualifying income is going to be an important thing because the couple is used to qualifying jointly for a property for being pre-qualified or whatever. At this point, whether one spouse is trying to refinance out the other spouse or they're both trying to sell the marital home and purchase other ones, the income's going to be a big deciding factor along with the credit score. Absolutely.
And then the value of the house, is there enough equity in the house to support a refinance? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Is there enough equity? There also will be closing cost with refinance will be an extra expense that whomever will occur that's trying to refinance the other partner. But they will have to qualify with their individual credit score and income.
Well, the other thing that always comes is how long it's going to take for the house to sell. So in your experience in today's market as a realtor, how long has it taken for a house to sell once it's put on the market if it's priced correctly?
And that is the key, exactly what you just said. If it's priced correctly in a hot market, and what I say by market, I'm not talking about just generally a city or a county or anything like that. I'm talking about down to the specific neighborhood. If it's priced right and inventories are low, 30 to 90 days. If it's any of those factors are not into play, it's not priced correctly, or the neighborhood's flooded with properties, it could take 90 plus days.
So it really does vary on the price, the location, and all those factors kind of conglomerate into, how fast it's going to sell or how slow it's going to take, or how much time it's going to take for it to sell.
Absolutely. And that's what an experienced real estate agent would be able to come in and really dive into this and do. It's more than just sales comps that you're looking at. You're also looking at the thing that doesn't determine value, but it determines the length on the market. Is I call it everybody talks about comps, but I call it the competition list, which when I get a seller that wants comps, I give it that, but I also give them the competition to show them what's available in what we're going to be up against in their neighborhood slash micro market.
Well, one of the, questions that really comes up, is when families have kids. Of course, the children are always at the forefront of a divorce. They're usually what everybody's most concerned about, and honestly, getting them past this and what's really in their best interest. So, if you have a couple with kids going through a divorce and they're both or one's going to be looking for a new house, so what options are there, or what would your advice be to them if they want to stay in the same area or school zones or things of that nature to better help transition the children?
Sure. Well, one party could always refinance out the other party if they can qualify. We've already touched on that a little bit. On a personal note, and somebody who's been through a divorce and been through some of this myself, um, Sometimes the house may be a little toxic. Maybe they want to stay in the same school zone, but maybe they want to sell the marital home would be a great option. And then each of them to buy a home, it may be a little bit of downsize because you don't have the same amount of income, and then buy homes. I always say we got to sell it fast because they don't have a lot of time. We've got to get them financed. And the last and final thing is we've got to find affordable options and quick. So that's what I recommend. And, with an experienced real estate professional, they'll be able to get you a search down to specific school zones. Maybe children need to ride the bus. So if the house is still a warm place, then maybe one party can refinance out the other party, and then the other party can go purchase another house or rent in that same school district, maybe to make it easy on the children, bus riding and stuff like that.
I think you touched on something there that's kind of critical. In my 20 years of doing family law, what I see a lot is there are people who want to stay in the home and they're real big on that continuity. And maybe those are the people that don't like change and they want to maintain the house. In today's market, I'm seeing a lot of people who want to stay in the home, not only for the kids, but because they want to try to keep that mortgage if they can and not do a refinance and keep that 2.2 or basement bottom mortgage rates. So I'm seeing a lot of that. But then I also see, on the other hand, a lot of people who are fresh starters. And I think that's what you were touching on. People who decide that they want a fresh start, a fresh house, a new beginning, a new chapter, and don't want to be grounded in something in the past that may have unpleasant memories or memories of the past that they don't want to be surrounded by daily. So I think as a realtor, that would probably be one of the better parts of your job, and one of the joys is helping people either rebuild or move to that next chapter in their life. And so that really touched on something I was thinking about, and I think about a lot as a family law attorney, is helping people rebuild and helping
New
people start that next chapter.
new beginnings, I call it. So absolutely, that's great. That's the beautiful part about our job.
One of the things that we really touch on here a lot is resilience. So being resilient and helping people be resilient and move forward. That's kind of one of our core values, our core principles, and one of the things that we try to help our clients with is resilience and moving forward. So can you help our listeners understand what analysis you may go through or steps you may go through in trying to determine the true value of a piece of real estate that you're thinking about listing or putting on the market?
Okay. Well, usually we spoke about this a little bit earlier, but the sales comps is always going to be the main thing that you want to look at. But you're also going to want to consider the market conditions, market trends, condition of the property. And then we hit on this before too, what I've been calling like a micro market or a neighborhood, and you're going to have to dive into all that and compile it. It's more than just the sales comps because not all the houses are the same. Some of them have swimming pools, some of them do not. And you really have to kind of gauge it off of the other ones to come up with that property value. But it's a comparable market analysis. It's called a CMA, and that's what we do for any of our sellers. But in this case, it would be divorced family.
For listeners that are new to this, you said CMA. What does CMA actually stand for, and what does that mean?
Comparative market analysis, and that's where you're taking the subject property and doing a comparison against the recent sales comparisons or comps.
Okay. So it's really kind of, you're looking into the market and you're kind of looking at a snapshot of time over the last couple of months or year and kind of seeing what the market is saying is going to be the price and what the market dictates. Is that correct?
Yeah, 90 days is great. Sometimes I have to go back 6 months when I do these searches and perform these analysis. But I try not to go over 6 months because the market is rapidly changing, whether it's going up or it's going down. So I really try to keep it. And also within a certain range, you don't want to really leave that neighborhood if that neighborhood kind of conforms and you jump one neighborhood over and maybe they're more luxury or less luxury. You've got to stay in that same little pocket with likewise properties.
Well, when people are going through a divorce and they're thinking about selling their house, what advice could you give them or anybody looking to sell a house as far as how to set the house up or stage the house, to get it to sell quicker?
Okay. Well, one of the first things that I want to hit on the most, and it's what couples during a divorce probably like the least, is keeping up with the curb appeal, keeping the home looking pretty from, the first impression is going to be when they drive by or they pull up for these buyers, these potential buyers to look at the property or just doing a quick drive by kind of thing is keeping up the curb appeal, the landscape, keeping the grass cut, just keeping the curb appeal very sharp. Just keep in mind that that is the first impression. Secondly, is to declutter the house. That's another thing. A divorced couple, there may be some packing going on. There may be boxes out and about. So, declutter the house. And then also, this will be easy for a divorcing couple, but is to depersonalize the house, taking down the pictures of the kids and stuff like that, and making it a blank canvas, if you will. So a new family or a new owner could come in there and really envision themselves being in the subject property. So those are the main things that I would consider. Staging's another option if they don't have furniture. If they do have furniture and it's in good condition, sometimes we can help them save that expense and try to set up what they have in a friendly manner.
Well, that's interesting to me as a family law attorney because what I hear about a lot is, one spouse is going to stay in the house normally until it's sold. And then the other spouse is concerned, well, they're not going to cut the grass. They're not going to keep up with the pressure washing. They're going to, they're going to neglect the house and that's going to make it not sell. So that's something sometimes we have to kind of work at in the agreements, how we're going to deal with that, how we're going to ensure that that's going to be covered and that, that house is going to have that curb appeal. And, I also agree with you that when you're looking at a house, I think that, you want that family probably to picture themselves in the house instead of picturing your family in the house and have that blank canvas for their imagination.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, if people are going through a divorce or selling a house, that's a big step. And sometimes, of course, those steps are happening together because they're divorcing and they're selling the house. So how do you deal with keeping people's emotions in check, keeping the emotions down, whether it's a divorce or just a house sale in general? Because I can imagine that might be an issue that a realtor would have to deal with from time to time.
Sure. Absolutely. So the first thing is we set expectations, realistic expectations. I'm not personally a realtor just to tell you whatever you want to hear. I really feel like I'm called out to these certain circumstances, whether they're divorce or anything else, and they want me to be honest with them. So setting realistic expectations of, what is to come. And then also acting kind of as a neutral third party. I work as a transaction broker in the state of Florida, which means I'm a transaction facilitator, if you will. I'm technically working for that transaction for it to close and actually become a executed executed contract and executed transaction. With that being said, being neutral to both parties, kind of acting, I guess it would be similar in your field, maybe to like a mediator or something like that. I may have to go back and forth between the two different parties. Sometimes when they're amicable, we can have a group text message and it's just simply everybody's putting in writing. If it's not, and I can sense that it's not, then it's a one communication with one party, and then I go do the other communication with the other party and keep going back and forth until we can get to some common ground. But also just treating the situation like a professional, really trying to hold their respect through this because that they are going through so much right now. So it's the thing that you've kind of got to keep in the back of your mind that these are people and they're experiencing other bad stuff going on with this divorce. And I try to, in my own heart of hearts, I try to really look out to the new beginnings we were just talking about. You call it rebuilding, I call it new beginnings. But, the fact is, and sometimes I will tell them about that. Look, 6 months from now, you could be in your new home and living life the way you want to, and it could be a fresh start and kind of making it more of an exciting adventure rather than something that's just so bad that's going on in their lives right now.
Yeah, that's a total theme here too with us is, trying to one of my expressions is don't live life living in the rearview mirror because you're going to hit something. You got to be focusing on what's in front of you and, let the past go and try to start over fresh, whether it's, a fresh relationship with your ex-spouse, trying to get back on a good footing for sake of the kids or your economic prosperity. If you're worried about what's in the past, you're not focusing on the opportunities that are before you in the future. You're going to inevitably miss those opportunities. And one of the things we do, and it sounds like you do it too, we obviously as lawyers don't talk to both parties when we talk to our client, but we try to be very transparent through the process and communicate. As I find a lot of times in these emotional situations, it's really anxiety driven because they don't know what's happening next and they've never gone through this before, or and trying to alleviate the anxiety through providing them with information that they can count on and clarity that that hopefully quells that anxiety and makes it a little less stressful on them. And that's something that we really strive our strive to achieve with each client and try to do. And it sounds like that's the same thing you do, but with both parties, or the seller's agent, the buyer's agent, and whoever your client is, and trying to keep all that clarity and communication channels open for the betterment of everybody. And that's often, in my opinion, hard to do during a divorce. But it sounds like you have a good plan and a good strategy and a good methodology there, as far as trying to do that and keeping everybody on the same page. Because I can't tell you the number of times we hear he's listing the house without me. He's talking to the realtor without me. He's, and that causes such anxiety that someone thinks that their house is going to get sold out from under them, or that they don't have an equal place at the table on such a major decision. So I think with your technique of trying to keep everybody in line and everybody on the same page, and the transparency of the group text message, as long as they're not going to be hostile toward one another, is very professional, and it's a good idea. So what advice would you give to someone who needs to find a new home after a divorce?
Okay, so the first thing with finding a new home after a divorce is we're going to have to get their credit and their financing looked at. So we got to get them pre-qualified. The home we're going to have to sell fast. And the third thing is we're going to have to find affordable options for them, because the house that they were living in may not be as much house that they can qualify for on their own income being alone. So it's a real strategy technique right off the rip. See if we could get them pre-approved. Then while we're doing that, they're cleaning the house, doing the yard maintenance, curb appeal, all the fun stuff. And then we try to get their property to the market, because, time is money, and we're losing time, and it's not really on their side. If they can get along with this and do this from the beginning, it's so much easier, honestly, than when they're in the middle of the divorce case itself and maybe some feathers have been ruffled and now they're disagreeing worser. But if it's something they see kind of pre-divorce or at the beginning, and it's something that they can do, of course, all this has to get approval by their family law attorneys. And of course, my title company will work with the lawyers' offices to make sure that the funds are distributed how they both agree to.
All right. Well, I think that's a critical thing that you touched on, is pre-qualifying. Now, pre-qualifying means that you're getting them qualified for a mortgage on that new income and getting them ready to move forward, right? And getting a lender interested in working with them, right?
Correct.
So if you're going through a divorce, and I've seen this happen where people just quit paying the bills, or they quit attempting to pay the bills through the divorce process. Now that could affect their credit. If they're on there, or they're the person obligated to pay that debt, it could definitely, affect their credit. And I'm assuming that would make it very difficult if their credit score dips to get them pre-qualified, right?
It's going to be really bad if there's
We
a
hear,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. I'm sorry.
If there's late payments on a mortgage, That's pretty bad if you're going to go back even a few months later and, attempt to purchase a home or try to refinance out the other partner. Either or, you still got to get pre-qualified. So I would not recommend that. I would try to avoid that at all costs and at least try to keep that minimum mortgage payment paid. If you did miss it and it was in the middle of a divorce, I don't know how it would have exactly affect every individual's credit score. Maybe a letter of explanation from the client, and then maybe a letter of explanation maybe could come from the family law attorney if the specific bank and underwriter even want to look at it, if they're willing to look at it, if it could get put to that level.
So really, if you're thinking about gamesmanship on your part, oh, she's in the house, so I'm not going to pay the mortgage, or I'm going to, cut off the funds so people can't pay credit cards, or she bought that on the credit card, but the credit card's joint. You might be cutting off your nose to spite your face, because in the next chapter, when you need to get that credit approved for a loan, for a mortgage, or a new car, you may have harmed yourself. Correct?
Absolutely. Think of this selfishly, that you're doing this, you're making that house payment on the other spouse, maybe still living in because maybe they can't afford it all the way, or maybe you are coming together to pay part of it. But think of it in a selfish way. If that's easier for you and you're, going through one of these divorces that, hey, I want to get a new car when this stuff's done. I want to get a new house. Like I want to take the kids on some trips. I want to do something fun. Don't destroy your credit over this. It makes absolutely no sense, not unless it's absolutely unavoidable and there's actual a means of distress that's going on, which is a whole different set of topics that we could talk about.
Well, in my experience, there's one party normally that's what I call the money party, or the law calls pecuniary party, the party who has the higher earning capacity, has maybe more assets that are available to them. And it's my experience that as you go through the divorce process, if the moneyed party unreasonably quits providing the funds to help pay the debts or support this other spouse or support the children, which cause these credit issues, judges do not look favorably upon that. They like the status quo. They like to see the creditors being paid. They like to see almost a spirit of cooperation, um, even though you're going through a rough patch in this divorce. But to me, that's critical. I tell clients all the time, you think you might be winning, but you're really damaging your future, when it comes to the credit, or it comes to the new beginning. But also, when we go to court, the judge is going to want an explanation as to why you're letting the house go in foreclosure, when it's very clear that you have the income to support the note, to pay the bill. And the judge is not going to like what is probably the most major asset of the marriage, the house, being lost because you're angry. And that's not a good look to have when you're going to court. And it's something I try to avoid, being in that position. And I try to counsel my clients on the future, everybody's future, because especially if you have kids, there's going to be animosity through the divorce. Unfortunately, no matter, almost all of them have some degree of animosity. However, you got to think about where the kids are going to be living. They're going to need to live someplace at their mom's. They're going to need to live someplace when they're with you, and damaging that for both of you, and not being able to really provide for those children and provide them a stable environment for your time sharing, and the time sharing with the other parent is it's really bad. And you can't just tell the bank I had a lapse in judgment. They're not that forgiving, unfortunately. So another question I was going to ask, because it comes up often, is people who have multiple pieces of property. They may have a house they live in. They may have a rental property out here in Florida. People own a lot of condos, investment condos, VBRO properties now that they're renting out. And what advice would you give them as a real estate agent if they're going through a divorce and looking to sell maybe the rental property or the investment properties?
Well, that's exactly where I was going to start. First off, if there's multiple properties, they're going to have to decide which ones they're going to sell off, which ones they're going to keep. We don't have exactly an exact amount of properties we're talking about, but Maybe they own a handful. Maybe they own 5 properties. They got to figure out which ones they're going to keep and which ones they're going to get rid of. Maybe one spouse wants to refinance certain ones. Another spouse wants to refinance certain ones. That's another thing that's going to go back to the whole refinance. Maybe they qualified together. Let's just say they were both professionals and they both had solid income. Now they're going to have to get financing just off of their income or use some type of debt service ratio style loan.
Well, what should people really know, or what would you like to tell them about refinancing after the divorce? Can you give them some step by step, some insights, some tips and tricks that might help them with this process if
Okay.
they want to stay in the home?
If you want to stay in the home, you're going to have to refinance out the other spouse. And it's a very similar process to getting approved to purchase a home. You're going to you first do an application with the specific lender. You're going to put down all your debts, all your income on the application. Then from there, what they'll do is they'll run your credit. And if the credit looks right and it looks like that's something doable, they usually request the documents, the paycheck stubs, tax returns, too. I believe in your field, it's called the mandatory disclosures. It's a
Yeah,
lot of us.
all those documents that nobody likes to provide but are mandatorily required so that there's transparency. I'm assuming the bank demands the same transparency before they want to give you a mortgage in your house.
You bet. You bet.
So when you refinance, do you call a realtor? Do you call a mortgage broker? Do you call the bank? Who's the first person a person should reach out to when they're looking just to do a simple refinance to get the equity out of the house to give it to their spouse to equalize the equitable distribution?
You can call a real estate agent. Well, I've had folks call me before about refinancing. It's nothing that I personally do and that I hold a license for, but I know many folks in the mortgage industry, whether they're a mortgage broker or they're a mortgage lender, and I can get them set up with the right people. But, talk to your circle, local credit union you could go to as well if that's something you're interested in, or maybe have a relationship with them. But no, the realtor doesn't do the refinance. But if you do know a realtor, they can most certainly get you in the right direction.
So one of the questions I was going to ask is, and maybe you can elaborate on this, what is the equity in a house, in a marital home? What is the equity? How do you define that?
Okay, so I'll make this real easy. The equity is the gap, and let's just say the house is worth $500,000, 500,000, but there's a mortgage note that's still sitting at 300,000. Okay, so the equity between the two is going to be 200,000. Does that make sense? So
So
that's
it's
what's been built up in value, equity over the years and through making payments.
value of which you could sell it for minus what's owed on it.
Absolutely.
And, in a divorce case, Florida law is equitable. And a lot of people just off the bat think that means equal. And most of the time it does, but it also means fair. But fair most of the time is equal, right? 50-50 is usually fair. But under certain circumstances, special circumstances, the judge has the ability in Florida to move the needle one way or another off the 50-50 if they need to create equity, to create fairness between the parties. If someone maybe has went far beyond the other spouse and making improvements or has a lot of sweat equity, the judge can look at that. It's not very common, but the judge's hands are not tied with an outright 50-50 split. It is up to the discretion of the judge. So that's something I wanted you to tell the listeners from a real estate perspective. Because lots of times when we do consults, people come in and I have an $800,000 house. And so they're just chopping 800,000 in half in their mind, but they forgot to subtract the mortgage. And, that's not the equity. The equity is after you pay the bank off. So that was something I thought was important for us to touch on today and hear the realtor definition of equity and the lawyer definition of equity so that maybe people can have a better understanding when they're contemplating this or they're going in and talking to their lawyer about what equity really is and understand what the lawyer is telling them. So can you explain, explain or give some examples of creative solutions you've seen couples who are going through a divorce, and they're underwater on their mortgage. They're already behind, because a lot of times divorces, unfortunately, stem sometimes from financial hardships. The money dries up and the people are unhappy, and it creates a lot of stress when money dries up and they're underwater on the mortgage before they ever even talk to the divorce lawyer, before the divorce really initiates. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I don't like this topic as much, because I hate to see that people are in this situation being in a field of business that's all about people. But we would have to perform what's called a short sale. And basically, that's where they put it up for sale at an agreed upon price. And then we get it onto the market. Once we get an offer that comes in for it, they can agree to it. The two spouses can agree to it. And then at that point in time, it would have to get sent off to their bank that they have the mortgage with to approve the property being short sold of the mortgage payoff. Everybody thinks a short sale is a good deal, and they hear the word short, so they think it's going to be a quick process, if you will, when it really just is not, because they work it out, buyers and sellers, everything's good. Then it goes off to the bank and it sits there for 6 months. The bank doesn't typically want to do a short sale, but there are circumstances where they will, and we've done some before. There have been circumstances where the bank just never replies. 6, 8, 9 months pass by and the bank just sits on it, especially if they feel like there's any equity in there. But if there is any equity in there, even if they're behind on payments, we could try to shotgun a regular sale, get it on the market at affordable price, maybe where the parties are not profiting, if there is any type of equity left whatsoever, and then try to get it sold regularly. But if not, they'll have to do a short sale, and it will take third party approval from the bank itself that holds the mortgage to be willing to take that loss. In that case, usually they do issuance for the difference to the parties on the house. So be on the lookout for that, and make sure you get that to your tax advisor.
Okay, one other question I have, with it being sunny Florida and all, is there a certain season where you can get a better price for your house or that your house may sell quicker? Is it better in winter? Is it better in summer? Is it better in spring? Is there any methodology of patterns that you've seen as a realtor? If you listed here, you might get a little bit more or it might move faster.
Sure. Well, Florida's a little divided, you could say, in a sense where in the Panhandle, like where we're from, spring and summer are the hottest times of the year, and then it slows down fall and it slows down winter. You go to area like Sarasota, Miami Beach, some place like that further down, their season is in the winter months because everybody came down from up north. Still warm, their streets are more crowded, it's more popular. But I would definitely have to say that in the Panhandle, spring and summer, in the winters, more South Florida area, it's pretty steady, I'd say, year around. But the 800-pound gorilla in the room where everybody, especially the buyer pool, and I've even had some sellers say, hey, we're just going to wait till this passes over, but it's hurricane season. That stops
Yeah.
everything. As soon as there's a hurricane out in the Gulf or getting near the Gulf or the Atlantic, if you're on the other side of Florida, on the East Coast, yeah, that stops it dead as a doornail. Other thing
Yeah.
is insurance.
Nobody's sitting at home watching the Weather Channel thinking they're going to move to where the hurricane's coming. I'm assuming that's
No,
usually I'm going to put the realtor on hold and stop taking their calls and see that this happens. And I know from our own personal experience when we had Hurricane Michael came through, talk about turmoil in the real estate market with divorces because it becomes a three-way dance because you have the husband and the wife going through the divorce. Now the insurance company and the bank are involved because they're trying to repair or minimize damage to the collateral. You have a spouse who's just let it stay the way it is and sell it for what it is and cash out the insurance. And then you have another spouse a lot of times that wants to see the repairs get made. because they think that's going to fetch a better price or that they want to stay in the house. And that becomes its own perfect storm of issues. How do you help clients who need to downsize quickly after a divorce settlement? Is there any steps you take to really help them with that, or is that something that you can help them achieve?
Sure, sure. It's going to go back to getting them the financing that they need for them to be able to get pre-approved. And then for us to do a quick sale, we're going to have to, if they're going through a divorce and they've got so much hard stuff going on, but they're going to really have to get the house in line, and we're going to have to accomplish getting it on the market, but also getting it priced correctly during this phase so that we can accommodate a quick sale and we can help them get moved on. While all this is going on, I'm going to be out looking for affordable options for them to try to help them downsize during this period within the certain criteria, such as school zones and minimum bedrooms needed, etc.
Well, as we, start to wrap up here, and we'll have you back because we could go on for hours and
This has been
days
great.
on this topic. But one thing I want to leave off on is I want to ask you, what common real estate terms do you think our listeners should understand when going through a divorce?
Refinance is going to be the first one, because in so many cases, somebody will want to refinance out the other party. The other one's going to be equity, what we talked about earlier. That was that gap between what the home could be sold worth today and what the mortgage and all the debts pay off. The in between is the equity. And then the last thing, if they're in a distressed situation, falling behind on payments, would be the short sale process, where we would have to come in and perform the short sale on their property with third-party bank approval. So those are the three main takeaways that I'd want them to know.
One thing I think that, could be added to that list, and you touched on earlier, was the CMA,
Oh, absolutely.
comparative market analysis. And the reason I say that is because if you go to court, you're going to have to get an appraiser. You're going to have to get an appraisal performed on the house by an appraiser. That's who's going to be the expert witness at trial, who has the credentials to tell the judge what the value of it is. However, CMA is free, right? You perform those all the time as a realtor. And if you have parties who are maybe close on a number they think the value is, and they're approaching settlement on that issue, then I think, having those CMAs are very beneficial, so that maybe it helps bridge the gap, cuts down on animosity, maybe cuts down on the cost that are associated with having an appraiser come out and do that. And it gives people sometimes, in my opinion, a reality check. Because I normally see this happen where one person says the house is worth $800,000 and the other person says the house is worth $400,000, or they're like night and day, like they're apart. Usually because somebody wants the house for $400,000 and don't want to pay the other spouse the full amount. But to me, a CMA is a quick litmus test of what a realtors think it's worth. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the realtor's got to sell the thing. And if realtors are telling you your neighbor sold for 900,000 and their house was smaller and didn't have a pool, then, we can kind of get some reality checks and start conversations about reaching an agreement on that, or a stipulation as to the value of the house, which hopefully, saves people time, money, lawyers' fees, costs. So that's one thing that I think is critical, critical thing for them to understand and take advantage of. If you have a realtor you're working with, or reach out to Joey or anybody in that area wherever you're at listening to this, and maybe get a CMA or two, and that way you can start your planning and your thinking, and what things may be worth and what the equity might be in this. And maybe you can start planning your future with a little more certainty and a little more reality than just, making up a number off of what your heart tells you. Because that can get you in trouble sometimes, where you underestimate the value of or you're overestimating the value of something because you have a attachment to it, or maybe you don't have fond memories of it and you devalue it. Well, look, Joey, we really do appreciate you coming on. We definitely appreciate you coming on the very first episode, and some ways being a guinea pig for this. And, we will definitely have you back in the future, and we can continue to talk about real estate issues and divorces, and, bringing your insights and, helping out people throughout the state of Florida who need this information, who are facing these challenges. And I really do appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. If anybody has any questions or needs any help, I'm always available for anybody. I will be 1,000% professional, transparent. I'll set expectations and try to do right by you. I appreciate you, Gerard, for having me on, and I'm really excited to see what there's to come.
Thank you. And thank you all everybody out there for listening. And I hope that you will subscribe to this podcast if you're listening through Spotify and some of the conventional podcast audio sources. And if you're seeing this on YouTube, I'd also ask that you go ahead and like and subscribe there. And that way you can stay attuned to the new episodes and get the information that may be helpful to you or helpful to others in your life. So you can help spread the information they need going through these tough times and these tough decisions, and know that there are other people out there who want to help them succeed and rebuild and be resilient. Thank you, Joey, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you.